Today, organizations have got access to amounts of data that only a few years ago would be unimaginable. We can access lots of data related to our own businesses and to customers, to the business environment in general. And the so-called big data has come out of a number of factors. One is that data is generated by a number of different actors, if you want. The first one is, of course, companies. Organizations have people that record things. Thank goodness today we can record things in a much more automated way that reduces errors and improves the speed of recording and communication. Back in the days, we used to record things with pen and paper. And we still do that to some extent, and organizations create and generate lots of data. But now data is being created and generated and analyzed a lot by users, by consumers. And it can be on blogs, it can be on social media, it can be on feedback to companies, it can be on their behavior that gets observed. And this leads me on to the third area, which is there are lots of systems that create data. So if you go into a shop and it's a large store, it's very likely that they will check how many items you've bought, and this will go and be reported into a wider information system that will crunch all the data. And this is true for telecoms, it's true for supermarkets and governments when they look at traffic, for example. We have lots of data being recorded. Now, this is certainly a good thing. So having larger amounts of data available is a good thing because we can understand much more how we're doing. So we can understand our position, so what it is that we're doing today compared to yesterday, but also compared to other companies that may be in our same space, so competitors or suppliers, for example. We can try and understand how things are going, we can try to forecast. We can do a number of things that before we couldn't just do because we didn't have data available. And so our understanding of our workforce, for example, is much improved. So we can understand productivity, we can understand whether our planning was accurate, whether people actually feel well in what they do, whether they're competent, whether they're capable. We can relate customers and employee data together. So we can do a number of things. And this is, of course, very useful. At the same time, what a lot of organizations are experiencing is just that they are surrounded by noise, because they have so much data available that it's very difficult to make sense of it. And so starting to connect things becomes very tricky when you have so many things going on and so many data points around you. And this is where big data may actually not fulfill its promise of turning data into indeed information and insight. It's very difficult to turn data into something meaningful if we have too much of it and we cannot make sense of it. And so this is the big distinction between raw data points and something that we can actually understand and use. And so what I like to talk about is 3 points that we have to bear in mind when looking at data and what we can do with data. The first one is the one of relevance. So we want to have data that is related to what is important to us in terms of strategic objectives, in terms of the main aims of the organization. And these aims may be generally coming from the organization itself, or it may be dictated by a regulator or government, central government, if we're talking about local government, for example. It can be a number of parties that decide what is important to us, but this is the starting point. We have to focus on what is important to us and what is important for our customers. So we have to identify those things and also the connection that we can make between our people, that of course are our main resource in most cases, and our customers and our profitability. So data can support us in doing something important if they are related to what we call the drivers of our success and our main objectives and aims. This is the first point. The second point is obviously related to the data itself. So we want data to be reliable. Now, reliability means, first of all, that we want data to be accurate. So they have to be connected as much as possible to what it is that we want to know. If we want to know about workforce productivity, we want to have data on that. If we want to have something about retention, it will be on that. If it's about satisfaction, it will be on that. And so we want to have is something that is accurate, so that it reflects as clearly as possible what it is that we want to know. This is related to focus, which is another aspect, and essentially says we want to know only about that. So if we're interested in customer loyalty, we want to know only about loyalty and not about satisfaction in a broad sense, or about brand image. These things are related to loyalty, but they're not the same. And so we want to have information that is focused. We want to have data that is related only to that. A third point is the one of precision and repeatability, if you want. So we want to be consistent over time in the way in which we record and we report data. And this, of course, is much better supported by an automated system than the good old pen and paper. And something that is more rigorous than just I record in a certain way and you do in your own way. Because of course the data will become not comparable. It will be very difficult to make any form of inference, make any decision on that basis. And so we have to treat precision as also a key criterion. We also want independence. That is, if I measure your performance and somebody else measures your performance, we don't want to skew or bias your responses. And so if you think about looking at performance appraisals and how people respond to appraisals, we want to have a conversation that is as detached as possible in certain aspects, because we want the staff member to reply to the line manager in a way that is independent on whatever line manager she or he has. And so we don't want the people measuring the performance or recording the data to play a big role, because otherwise they would bias the content, they would bias the data. And so once data is reliable, at that point we can move with what is really the most interesting bit, which is the usability. Of course, you can have something that is relevant, that is reliable, but in the end we want to do something with it. Otherwise, we're not going to create any value for our customers. And so usability then depends on other factors. The first one is timeliness. You want to have data that reaches the people that make decisions at the right time, in the right place, and even more, in the right format. So if you are making certain decisions that have to be made by the end of the financial year or during your budgeting cycle, you want to have the right data at that point. There is no point in getting data when that has been done or that cycle has finished, right? So they may be incredibly accurate and precise, but they're just not in the right time or in the right place. The communication format matters a lot, because the way we communicate and report has got to provide a message. And that's where we go from data to information, if you like. So something that has got a meaning. It's not just raw points on Excel spreadsheets, but is what people understand and what people eventually can do. And so we want to communicate data in different formats depending on what we're trying to communicate, what type of message we want to convey. So sometimes, yes, we may have spreadsheets, but we want to use also other formats. It can be through dashboards, for example, where we combine histograms with pie charts, with statistical process control charts and different graphics. But we are trying to communicate different messages, and those messages have to be supported as much as possible by the right formats. And then ultimately, you also want to have the people sending the message not to skew the message. And so the information, if it's about a specific trend, that trend has indeed to be there. It doesn't have to be a glitch in the system or some kind of an outlier or something that will never repeat itself. So if we show the data because, if we give emphasis to the fact that there has been an increase in demand, for example, that increase in demand really has to be there. And it doesn't have to be part of a certain season or certain cycle. And so that's very important, because when we make decisions, we want to understand what the data says as much as possible, as opposed to what we are actually understanding because of the format that has been used or what people have been trying to tell us. So to conclude, big data is something that is going to stay with us, and that's a good thing. However, we have to be careful in what we do, because we want to have data and information as opposed to noise. And to do this, we want to ensure that it is relevant, so it's related to our priorities, that it's reliable, because it is accurate, it is precise, and it's focused and independent. And finally, we want to have data that is usable, that we indeed use to make good decisions and more informed decisions.
For information on how to get relevant, reliable, and usable data on your workforce performance, and to get a written summary of this podcast, please contact us at Crown Computing. Also, subscribe to our social media feeds for more insights on managing workforce and business performance.